Well, we continue with our special coverage on the countdown to tomorrow's start of the much-awaited Madlanga Commission. I'm now joined by Dr. Jean Redpath, a senior researcher at the Dullah Omar Institute, on the possible impact of the Commission's findings on reshaping policing strategy and, of course, enhancing accountability. Well, Doctor, thank you so much for your time. I think, of course, a lot of anticipation in regards to the Commission. But the first important question one must ask is, and we heard, of course, our colleague Vuyo Mvoka also asking this question, is how are the women and men in blue preparing for this Commission? Is there resistance? Is there some support as well?
Well, what we can look to is that there have actually been 3 previous commissions of inquiry into policing in KwaZulu-Natal. These were provincial commissions, and the first one of these was in 1999, and it particularly looked at taxi violence and the involvement of the police in the taxi industry. There was some cooperation by the police in that commission. In 2005, in the Madlanga Commission, there was another commission of inquiry looking into the politicization of some parts of the police. And then again, in 2016, ironically, just after the term of Senzo Mqunu as provincial premier, just after his term, the Morani Commission was instituted. And what we see is varying degrees of cooperation of the SAPs in these various commissions. The 2005 commission had the least cooperation, but by 2006, commissions had become more kind of established, and the principle that a commission of inquiry can require a police officer to come and testify had been established in the Khayelitsha Commission, which took place in the Western Cape, not in KwaZulu-Natal. Now, this is obviously a national commission, so in some respects is much more powerful, and the national government has more powers. But it's quite clear that there will need to be cooperation in terms of testifying at the commission. And the commission is really a reflection of the ongoing factional battles, political battles, and the involvement of politics in policing. In fact, one of the conclusions of the 2006 Morani Commission is that there was undue politicization of the police, and that there was an urgent need to professionalize and depoliticize the police in KwaZulu-Natal.
And you've mentioned there those numbers of those various commissions, very little in terms of what it has yielded. It's a national commission, but the reality is there is still this issue in regards to how this could perhaps even change policing going forward. Do you see it in any way changing how police are, essentially conducting their business now, and of course establishing that independence when it comes to politics as well?
Well, the powers of a national commission, so the commission doesn't have any direct powers, but the recommendations will go to national government, which has the power to implement those recommendations. And coupled with the recommendations that are coming out of the National Council Against Corruption, which have also recommended far-reaching changes within the South African Police Service, particularly around crime intelligence and the infiltration of crime intelligence. This is now starting to create a groundswell towards reform, and that reform will need to be not only legislative, but also in terms of how we people the SAPS and how they are disciplined. At the moment, we have a very strange situation where the ordinary employment law applies to the disciplining of SAPS members, and on top of that, it can be overruled by senior members of the South African Police, which we've seen happen in a parliamentary question, which revealed very serious offences committed by police officers. The police officers were disciplined, and then the senior brass overruled the disciplinary hearing findings. And so that kind of thing is part of what seriously needs to change. And we also need to look very closely on the professionalization of our police service and bringing back things like rank promotion examinations, which were done away with about 15 years ago.
And we know, of course, with regards to the commission, it's not just about, of course, the fact that there will be transparency in what is happening within the policing sector, but it also gives an opportunity for South Africans to shape public opinion about policing. We know that often on the ground, it's not a pretty story. We hear communities speaking about that trust deficit. What are we expecting from this commission in regards to at least public perception of police?
Well, currently, the various surveys from the HSRC and Afrobarometer are showing that trust in policing is at something of an all-time low, almost going into the teens in terms of percentages. And that is a very, very dangerous situation because policing cannot work without the trust of the public. Democratic policing requires the trust of the public. If you want to be an autocratic police force, you can do whatever you like. You don't need the public to trust you. But the kind of policing that South Africa wants and deserves needs the trust of the public. And if this commission only stirs up more discontent without having clear outcomes in terms of action being taken, then unfortunately, it will have an overall negative impact on policing. There must be clear outcomes and recommendations, and there must be the political will to implement those. Yeah. And that is going to be up to the national government to whom the recommendations will go.
And just before I let you go, you speak about reform. How could this commission possibly even change the very strategy, the very nature of policing, of the SAPS as we know it?
Well, I think that if it is able to identify people, and in fact, this is in the terms of reference that they will be able to identify people for urgent prosecution. So if some of the bad eggs are removed, and we know that there have been many, and then some already have been removed, but if more are removed, then we are in a position to begin moving forward. Unfortunately, we have to rely on the very institution that is involved in this commission, the SAPS, as well as the NPA. The NPA is also part of the terms of reference. And their trust figures have also been collapsing in the wake of lack of action coming out of the Zondo Commission. And they are the ones who will have to prosecute. So it is a very, very tricky situation, which could end up being a net negative if we don't see action taken at the end of it.
Well, thank you so much for your time. That was Dr. Jean Redpath there from the Dullah Omar Institute speaking about the realities of the commission, that it needs to, of course, yield results. Otherwise, we'll just be stirring the pot.